Welcome to another episode of the Innovating Together podcast. I'm your host, Bridget Burns with the University Innovation Alliance. I am super excited for today's episode because we typically are talking about all the relevant and cutting edge things happening within the UIA or the broader higher ed landscape. And today is going to be our first episode where we actually get to have a viewer on who's going to talk to us about what it was like to be part of the UIA the National Summit in 2018, what's going on currently in the field, and what they're thinking about for this coming fall summit. But first, I wanted to share that the UIA's Innovating Together podcast is sponsored by Mainstay, which is it used to be called Admit Hub. It's been so long that I've almost forgotten their name. They're the student retention and engagement platform that many institutions use that engages in RCTs and external validation in a way that we think ed tech companies should to prove that their products work. They've also been very effective at helping institutions achieve the things that we're most worried about, which is increasing retention and being able to keep students in and reduce summer melt. They did that with 21% reduction in summer melt at Georgia State and helped them retain 1,200 students they would have otherwise lost. So check out mainstay.com for more information about them. Now, on to today's episode. I'm really excited to welcome Gill Hunter from Eastern Kentucky University, who is the AVP of Retention and Graduation. Gill, thanks so much for joining us. I'm really excited to, we met in person briefly, but we also have emailed a bit. And so it's been this as close to IRL as we get these days.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. And I'm really pleased to be on too, Bridget. I appreciate it.
Well, so you reached out because you listened to the podcast and watched the shows, and you were saying that when I was talking about the upcoming UIA National Summit, which is going to be coming up in October in Tempe, Arizona, that it was reminding you of the UIA National Summit in 2018. And so, and you were thinking about how you're preparing. And I was like, man, would you come talk about that? Because people don't understand how magical this is. And I feel like I can't be trusted because I actually, so I'm looking for an outside perspective on what it was that folks missed and what they can think about or what you're thinking about when you are anticipating this fall. So can you share about how did you first connect with the UIA, I guess?
Yeah, so I'm happy to talk about all that. And I know one of the first rules of podcasting is to never correct the host, but it was not the announcement of this year's summit that made me think of the 2018 summit. I have thought about it many, many times, talked about it many, many times since I attended. When I first found out about it back in 2018, probably early 2018, the Vice President of Student Success here at Eastern Kentucky University sent it to me as a link, forwarded an email about it, and said, I want to send you and one other person to this. And so it was somebody from the faculty side. I'm a faculty member, but I'm also working in student success. And he said, I want to send you to this, and I want you all to collect ideas to bring back. And so I went with a very open mind. The guy I went with was a friend and an acquaintance and friend. And we went with a real, spirit of let's learn something we can apply. And, so that's what got me there. But it's more fair to say that the things that I have remembered are a combination of things that I have no idea why I remember them. They just stuck. And also things that have been touch points for EKU in the 6 years since the summit happened. For example, I remember, I think it was you talking about Michael Crow's 15-minute meetings and how you were fortunate to get one of those. And in that small window of time, you pitched the UIA vision or developed it with him anyway. And look at the history that's been made, from that moment. I also remember Mark Becker jumping up onto the stage, literally leaping on the stage, saying he does that all the time. And me kind of admiring that, but never being brave enough to do it myself at any of the student-facing events we've done here at EKU. But I also remember when Mark and President Becker and Tim Rennick told Georgia State's story. and how I took that from that moment kind of as a playbook or a script that we would apply here at EKU. And we've done a lot to do that. I don't know if you were in charge of this part of the summit or not, but we had Tim Riddick made himself available for 10 to 15 minute meetings, one-on-one meetings. I say one-on-one, he had 3 or 4 people that work with him there as well. And I got one of those, and I sat down with him and asked him about cohorting first-year students. And that was an idea we had kind of been tossing around here at EKU, but didn't really know how to do it. And I asked Tim, how many courses do you cohort first year students in? And he looked at me, I swear to you, he looked at me like I had 3 heads. And he said, all of them. And that made me swallow hard, because I thought, how do I do that here? And we haven't gotten to that place, but we are cohorting now after the years since then, with a couple of speed bumps, pandemic related along the way. We are cohorting every single first year student. We had about 2,800 in last year's first year cohort. We're cohorting every single student in 2 or 3 classes. So it's shrinking the university. It's helping them gain some familiar faces. It's building a support network for them from day one. And I owe it to the summit for that kind of experience. And it was so valuable. Last thing I'll mention was what happened real near the end of the summit last year. And that was, we had I think it was like a 2-hour-long session on design thinking. And I remember people could choose, do you go to a design thinking intro or do you go to something else? I chose design thinking. And we have, I had only heard that it was such a thing. I didn't know any of the details. They gave us a framework. We walked through an exercise. We kind of got a sense of how it works. We've used that process so many times here at EKU in the years since then. We've had a couple what we call think tanks, where we bring people together, faculty, staff from different areas of the university. And we've just gone through design thinking, kind of semester-long design thinking exercises, where we end up piloting things and then coming back together to see what we want to scale. And it has been so useful that I know that we've gained those kinds of things and more from the summit.
That is my love language, of just finding out that it works, that it's helpful, because our work was always designed not to be about us, but to be about institutions that we may or never meet, and making it so that their life is easier, and that innovation and change can be easier no matter your budget, your location, or the size of your institution. So this is just wonderful for me. And you said you came with one other person?
I did.
And when you're thinking about this coming year, are you thinking about just another, or are you thinking about a team? I'm just curious about what would be useful for you then. And also, I love that you actually use the design thinking, because we're going to, of course, do that, but also process mapping. And then there's some new emergent stuff happening around change management that I think is really cutting edge at Oregon State, actually. So we'll see. I basically want to make sure, what are the skills you actually need? Because we want to build everything based on what the field actually wants.
Yeah, and we actually we have a process mapping exercise coming up again in a week and a half here on campus. We've made a couple changes to the student registration process, and we're going to process map that, because what students are seeing does not quite line up with what we think should be in place. So we continue to use that. And I still remember Michigan State process mapping their communications to students and talking about that, and us doing that same thing. This would have been way back in 2018 or 19, and being embarrassed. I think that was Michigan State's response too, but we're embarrassed at what we saw when we did it, and we were able to streamline things. So we continue to use process mapping as well. That wasn't your question, though.
No,
I just threw that in.
I love that. Thank you, because that's my whole thing, is that the fact that Michigan State lets us talk about that makes it okay for other institutions to do something that is going to feel that way. But if we don't sit with that discomfort and process through that, we're never going to get better for our students. And so their act of bravery of being willing to do it and share about it on stage has just affected, I think, millions of students. And I just wish I could possibly get my arms around the impact of that story, which is why I always tell it, because I'm like, this is should give you license to not feel like you have to hide the ball, or you have to CYA on any of this stuff.
Right. Yeah. And that relentless kind of forward progress is what we're interested in here. And and so when we can learn from others' mistakes, but also successes, we will do that. And I was really grateful for that. You did ask me though about like who I would bring with me or who could be coming with
Yeah.
me?
For this fall, what are you
All right.
thinking?
Yeah. So, all those decisions are not mine, of course, but I have reached out to one of our assistant provosts, and asked him. He is in charge of our Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning, and he and I have collaborated to run a couple of think tanks on campus and do some of that kind of faculty facing work. And we brought in staff to that work as well. So I've asked him about it, and I think he is certainly interested. And then we have someone who currently works in our student affairs division, and I think that person also is well situated, has been in a couple of meetings with me lately where Georgia State constantly comes up. And so I went to him and said, hey, I think that there is this summit coming up that you might be interested in and want to do something with. So that could be our team of 3, but I know that you're kind of pushing team of 3, team of 5. And if I can get EKU to focus on team of 5, then that will benefit our work immensely. And so I'm gonna try to advocate for that.
Well, so honestly, I just want it, whatever works for you, whatever you need, right? Like we're trying to listen. I think the best form of entrepreneurship is one where you're obsessed with the people you're trying to serve. And so for us, it's about listening to the sector. And also selfishly, like, this is the thing I wished existed. I was telling you, like, I wish that there was an event I could go to where I could bring my team that could help us kind of accomplish like a retreat, reset, focus, clarity, like where are we on our goals? What do we need to change or prioritize? How's it working? Also hear the best ideas that we should be hearing instead of getting caught up in the same loop of information. And then, ideally you're doing that alongside others who are going to help you feel like you're not the only one, and that you're going to pick up things that you could be doing together, pick up some skills that you could use and apply. But also, if people want to team up on shared challenges or a big idea they knock loose in the middle of this, like, we want to set it up so that funders are ready to resource and support any networks that emerge. I'm also trying to raise money for just scholarships, period, because I don't want institutions who are extremely wealthy to go, this is not for them. This is for the rest of us, right? And I was just telling it, like, we set the price literally to cover the bare minimum of the cost because everything, has to actually be paid for. But we want to make sure it's a great experience for you. But what I'm trying to focus all of my fundraising around is scholarships for either if I could get funders to support their grantees or types of institutions or institutions who want to work on specific challenge areas. That's what I'm trying to move on. And right now I haven't been able to make a lot of progress with funders. So I'm, this is partially, just keep on trudging, but that's how the fundraising world works. And, but as soon as that happens, like, our priority is to make it so that institutions who cannot afford, we would want to go back through. And even if you've already registered, we would want to, those are our values. We want to make it so that this work is helping students who we will never meet. And again, under-resourced, serving low-income first-gen students of color. So that's, but on the size, whatever works for you. If it's, again, I would, if I could get a funder, I actually did write a whole concept for a billionaire that I was like, all fingers and toes were crossed, but it didn't work out, where I was just going to cover it full freight and then be able to scholarship everyone. That was my dream. It's like, we could just say, you could bring 5 to 7 people, bring the right people to take action. And as long as you're willing to commit to an actual goal for your students, like, then that would be magic. But if anyone knows any billionaires, just letting you know, that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, yeah. And I'll be happy to point any billionaires that are associated with EKU your way as well. But,
Great.
That list, I think that list is pretty short.
Yeah.
You did mention something, and it's at the very end of the 2018 summit, you really promoted the idea of collaboration, and all the way through the summit, you talked about, and I may not have the exact quote right, but it's something like, when universities collaborate, students win. And you gave us space at the very end to kind of pitch ideas and look around for collaborators. And I remember there were a couple of universities from Florida. Central Florida may have been one, Florida Atlantic may have been the other. And we had a short-term conversation after that. Things kind of fizzled from there, but the ideas were shared, focused on student belonging, student engagement. And, this is before the pandemic, when student belonging and engagement just exploded as a national need. And it continues to be something we're struggling with at EKU, getting students plugged in, getting them to see their place and commit to that place. And it was really heartening to me back in 2018 to know that Central Florida, if I'm remembering correctly, Florida Atlantic, if I'm remembering correctly, we're struggling with the same thing because they're very, very different universities from EKU. But that kind of collaboration is what I want to find, not just internally between divisions within the university, but externally with universities that are struggling with the same things we are, but we don't often have a platform for talking about what we struggle with. And in a place, we can't do that in the state very well because we're set up competitively, performance-based funding, et cetera. When we gain, then another university loses. But if we can do that nationally and have that national conversation, I think that's where students win. And that's my ethos for sure.
100%. And that's part of why, people are always like, why is there only one UIA campus per state? And it's like, because of that, because unfortunately we have set up the rewards and the incentives in this sector to pit campuses who are geographically adjacent against each other, which is unfortunate because that's collaboration in person would be easier there. Right. But
that's right.
We actually had several networks that did pitch and get, I think they each got $50,000 from the ECMC Foundation at the end. And then we actually invited them to the UIA convenings for the next year so they could just have space to convene, which would be, that would be amazing. But since then, this fizzle out thing, we think we've actually, that cracked the code. Part of the reason why we created the University Innovation Lab was a space that after the summit, there's actually a natural kind of hub for people to engage in collaboration. And it's not just a website. It's like they actually have virtual convenings and on various topics. They do trainings and courses and things like that. So our hope is that this time we finally have the architecture that's needed for transitioning the clusters that form out of the summit so that they can sustain. That would be ideal because it is really hard otherwise.
Yeah, I love that, and I think sign us up. We want to be a part of that, and we want to be leaders in that field for sure.
Well, so this has been amazing to hear that it was so useful for you, and I appreciate kind of your explanation of what it was like, because I'm trying to explain to people it's not like other conferences. We really didn't. We were trying to change what we expect from conferences. We were trying to shift the experience so that it was much more around like not fighting biology and actually leaving feeling like you actually got energy from the experience and didn't leave feeling like, oh God, I'm so exhausted to go home.
Right.
Which is how we mostly feel. So talk about what's going on right now, because we're as we're spending time on planning this, and a lot of events start with like, who's our big keynote or, a name to draw people. But we're trying to think of it more as, what do people need that would be rejuvenating, and what kind of design would set them up to have the conversations that they really need to have? And, this time they don't have to hire consultants and have a retreat that's facilitated. They can actually just come to this one place where we're all going to do it together. So talk about the challenges right now that you feel like your institution wants to talk about or, spend time on together.
Sure, and I can do that. I mentioned, I mentioned student engagement and belonging. Certainly that is at the top of the list. In terms of student-focused outcomes we're seeking, it's simple things like attendance and participating in the process. I know I've read from some other universities in the Chronicle and Inside Higher Ed, that kind of thing, where they've been writing about attendance as a major problem nationally, and we want to do something about that. But also just student participation in the process of learning. We know that is a real need for us. We are growing our online presence. We have, I'll get the number wrong, but something like 5,500 online students right now on a campus of 15,000, or a university of 15,000, and we want to grow that. But how do you build affinity? How do you get students to own their learning process when they're online? Well, that same problem translates to, in classroom, on campus kinds of scenarios too. So we want to work on that. But broader than that, I'm an English faculty member. So my area is liberal arts. And we have a lot of departments, a lot of programs on campus that are having trouble expressing their value and making their value clear to students, to families, to legislators who are paying ever more attention to what higher ed costs and what the outcomes are. And we really want to focus on kind of taking students as they enroll and helping them see what their career trajectory is, but doing that in a way that is student friendly, family friendly, public friendly, and not just talking about our value, but talking about our outcomes through the lens of value as well, because we believe in what we do at EKU. We call ourselves the School of Opportunity, and we the last 2 years, our first year class has been about 52 or 53% first generation, about 60% Pell eligible. So we have a lot of students that come here because they accept our promise of opportunity, and we have to support them. We have to keep that promise. And so making that make sense to parents, making that make sense to the Commonwealth of Kentucky is something that we are struggling with. And I know we're not alone.
No.
I know there are Hispanic serving institutions, historically Black colleges and universities. There are low income serving institutions, though that's not an official designation. There are a lot of schools like us that struggle with those same kinds of things.
Everyone is right now, and the question is, I see this conversation that immediately goes to we have to change our message, and I always urge caution that we need to take a step back and did we actually listen to what was being said, right? Because the public is giving feedback. Feedback is not about you. We always, the best advice I've seen was like, when someone gives you feedback, it's not about you. What it is their talent. They're showing you their lens by which they look at the world through.
Yes.
So it's a tell, right? And so what it's saying is, this is what I need now. This is what the economy, this is what, in a place where people are worried about, they can't buy houses. It's a challenging time, extremely polarized. So when they are communicating, I think higher ed takes it very defensively as an attack, but it's really information about what it is they are looking for. And it doesn't mean change everything. It's often subtle things, but every time that we reply by speaking over them and saying, but our graduates make blah, blah, blah. It's like, no. I still have that mental model in my head of the English major working at Starbucks. And you have to overcome this theoretical person. But I find that the languaging of that higher ed is the talent activator is really resonating, because it is what we're supposed to be. Like, if you think about it, geniuses are born into every inch of the world, right? Like, who knows what someone is capable of.
That's right.
Regardless of the family you're born into, the neighborhood you grew up in, there's this core essential talent underneath, but you need activation. And that's what higher ed is about. It's about awakening. It's about enlightening. It's about turning on the light bulb. And if we're doing our job, then the genius who's going to save the world is going to their talent's going to be fully realized, and they're going to be able to contribute their talent to society, right? Like, we want to live in a place where that's how higher ed thinks, is like, we're here to activate the talent, and to ensure. And so the question is, what does that look like? It depends in some places, because in some places it's feeding your family, some places it's social mobility, some places it's actual intergenerational wealth, or it goes beyond finance. It goes beyond, goes to, finding a problem to solve, being able to create change in society. I don't know, but I just feel like this is the place where we're going to have that conversation, because I think I think the bones of higher ed are rock solid. And granted, I am biased, right? Like, I'm not, I don't claim to be neutral. But I do think there's some stuff that we could do different, right? Like, when I talk to incoming students, I'm like, I just think that we're missing out by not telling them that they are responsible for 50% of their learning, and it has to happen outside the classroom. And if they start seeing it as, you have to maximize this place, and 50% is going to happen outside the classroom, that would make them not feel like they're just here to be passively spoon-fed.
That's right.
Right? Like, we have to think differently about it. And I think there's so again, it's little tweaks, but the bones are good.
We have started talking about co-curricular transcripts, and I suspect you have in your network somebody who has done good work in that area. We've started talking about it because we want exactly what you've described, that deliberate connection for students to be able to see, and then to demonstrate to potential employers, et cetera, how their out-of-class experiences align with what they are doing in class and in their major.
This is super helpful because it's giving me insight about how we should plan this, because the other part is that since the summit we had wrapped, because it ended after COVID, we did this redesign of college to career. And the headline is, the only place all students go is the classroom. And so instead of having a career services office, keep those people, they're great, but they're instructional designers. And they are coaching faculty to integrate career readiness into every class, at least one activity, at least one experience. and using what they call NACE competency language, which I didn't know what it was at the time, but basically you should be able to describe what you learned in a classroom while you're in an interview to an employer in language it resonates for them. So I think that plus the playbook that we developed there, we could figure out the specific, because we use process mapping, we use design thinking to reimagine it, but that embedding career readiness, and then what you're talking about of the transcript actually reflecting it, I think that's exactly where we need to go.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful.
Well, this has been so wonderful for me. I feel like this is a very selfish thing. Like sometimes we were just at a convening with all our campuses, and they're telling us all the cool stuff that's happening. And we're like, I don't think you understand, when you run a remote organization that's virtual, that you kind of live on fumes or breadcrumbs, because you're like, you're working away and you don't actually know always the impact, because you're too busy building the next thing. So it is super wonderful. I'm going to have to make sure that our fellows and our liaisons who help make this incredible event understand just the value it created. So, Gill, this has been 10 out of 10. So excited. And I'm so excited for you to come to the summit. And for folks at home, it's going to be October 22nd to 25th, and it's in Tempe, Arizona, UIA Summit 2024.eventbrite.com. And as I said, it is going to sell out. People don't understand. We only planned it for about 450 people because we really want it to be intimate. And we are, and so when we say it's going to sell out, it is going to sell out. And we want to make sure that you're thinking about your team and the problems that you want to tackle together, because we want to hear stories like this about how you got the clarity you were looking for, you found the friends that you were looking for, and you got the plan to go back and take action. So
absolutely,
this has been super, super generous of you to share with us. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you in Arizona in late October.
Yep, I'm looking forward to it, and I really appreciate the time just to hang out with you here.
Well, I so appreciate it. So, and thanks at home for those of us who are watching. This has been another episode of the Innovating Together podcast. If you are a viewer, a listener who has actually been to the summit, please reach out, because I would love to have you share your experience. And also, I'm most interested in the challenges that people want to spend time tackling today. We want to make sure this is built not based on the ideas that I fantasize we want to focus on, but rather the ones that you're actually experiencing. So we are super easy to find. DMs are open on all of social media and on our website. So I will see y'all soon, but I hope this has been a light, inspiring message for your Monday morning. And otherwise, we will talk to you soon.